Hello everybody and welcome to this absolutely fantastic event. It's all about how can we create a more open, fairer and inclusive industry. And I'm so excited in this rare opportunity of having so many CEOs in one conversation. So it's a fantastic event. I think we're going to do three things. We're going to, first of all, hear how the industry is doing. What are the initiatives that everybody's working on in order to improve the diversity of the industry? But then I hope that we'll be reflecting on what we can do more of and in order to accelerate our progress. And then finally, it's about involving all of you and inspiring further action. What more can we do and what do we need to happen? But first of all, I want to introduce this fantastic panel who I'm sure don't need any introduction, but just to say who is here. We've got the fabulous Jane Frost, who, as you all know, is the CEO of the Market Research Society. We have Amy Cashman, who is the CEO of the Insights Division of Kantar. We have Ben Page, who is the CEO of Ipsos Mori, and Steve Phillips, who's the CEO of Zappi. And we have Warren, who's the CEO of GfK, and Bob, who is the CEO of iView. So what a collection of fabulous people to talk about this incredibly important issue. I wanted to really kick off this with a conversation and asking Jane to reflect back on the first time we really talked about this, because Jane approached me and said, you know, I have a real passion for the research industry leading the debate and the initiatives around diversity and inclusion. And I really want to do something significant. And I know, Jane, you kicked off with some research, didn't you, working with Kantar. But I just wanted to ask you, you know, when you reflect back, what was it that was really driving you at that time? And yeah, let's hear about your initial passion.
Well, obviously, we all start from the deeply personal, and I happen to be a woman who grew up in business in the 80s when things was really dire for most of us. So I survived what other women of my generation did, which would be sexual assault and all the sorts of really awful problems that we had at the time. And thank God we are. It's not gone, but we're through that. But on taking this role at MRS, I would stand up in front of conference, I'd see 700 faces, and I'd think, literally, this is not good enough. This is not diverse. And how can we, who actually preach a lot about evidence and holding a mirror up to the world and helping our clients get insight, how can we do that if the people who are actually conducting the research, who are interpreting, are so monocultural? And I think anyone who's been to conference a number of times will have heard me rant. Well, I got bored of ranting, and you said very sillily, but thank you, you'd do anything to help. And I think I said, here's a drink, we need to do something about this. But more than that, I'd like us to be the best at what we do, so that people look at us and say, these are the people who are doing the interpretation, providing the insights, and they're a wonderfully reflective, inclusive bunch. And we are leading the way at the moment, because I know that the advertisers come to me for advice. So I want to keep it that way, not because it's nice, but it is, but actually because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, if we've got those insights, and we should be leading via those insights in our own organizations. So I think I've stopped boring people at conference, I hope, because we've got action taken. But I did say at the awards a couple of years ago, when we could get together, please sign the pledge. And 3 days later, a lot more people came in. So it's due to people also around this virtual table who actually led the way that we've actually managed to crank up some action.
Yes, I remember you saying to me at the time, of all industries, we are the industry that represent people. And how can we be true to ourselves if we are not driving forward these issues around diversity? And I remember back, it must be nearly 2-3 years ago, that we as a group of people, Bob, I'm sorry that you weren't on the dinner invitation, but the rest of us gathered around a table for dinner at Jane's initiative to talk about what could we do collectively. And I think that's a really powerful thing, isn't it? Is about how can we work together to drive this agenda forward. And so, Ben, when you think back at that time, when we all got together and we had that conversation at dinner in Soho, what a strange thing that was a long time ago. What were your thoughts at that time? I know you're already doing a lot of work in this area anyway.
Well, we've tried to build grassroots movements, and I think it's great. No, the industry needs to do something. We're dominated by, let's be honest, white graduates basically, and that has a bias in itself. Over the last couple of years, and I think ultimately, when we're in the measurement business, what gets measured gets done, and so we can sign all the pledges we like, we can have all the networks that we like, and I've got, Ipsos Mori is one of the larger ones. We've got lots of different networks for different aspects of diversity, but ultimately, we have to. It is the gender pay gap. It is the ethnic pay gap, and it's those things and the strategies that you're going to do to measure that, and then do focus on it, that will make the difference. I think the biggest difference we've done is to remove our bias towards certain types of universities and certain degree classes by just removing the need for any qualifications at all in recruitment, and that has at least meant that by just setting people a simple test, our graduate profile now matches the ethnic profile of graduates, which is a quarter are ethnically diverse. But there's a hell of a lot more to go, and Britain is changing, and I think this is the challenge. We've got, I don't know about others on the call, and I'd be really interested, but certainly 2020, the year of Black Lives Matter, I think it saw a renewed focus. In Britain, we had the highest ever concern about racial inequality that we'd ever measured, right back to and race generally, right? Even though going back through the 80s when we were tracking it, it didn't, it's more so than during the Toxteth and Brixton riots. And that was, I think, the focus that COVID-19, when we were all staring at screens like this, gave us on the murder of George Floyd in America, and people all over Europe and certainly in Britain reacted to that. We saw the demonstrations, and there were reactions inside. I don't know about others on this call, but there were certainly reactions inside my business. And so we've made big changes as a result of that. But expectations of what is right will keep changing, and we need to keep adapting. I'll shut up.
No, I agree with you. Obviously, what happened last summer was a great accelerator of urgency around some of the issues. But what I thought was interesting was how quickly, as we came together and developed that pledge 2-3 years ago, that we could agree on all of the issues. And I know that we've moved some of them a long way, but there are still, as you say, lots of work to do. I know that you, Amy, have been doing a lot of work inside Kantar, haven't you, with networking and also promoting women?
Yeah, and I think what we've tried to do at Kantar is take a bit of a three-pronged approach to it. So you think about it in terms of talent, in terms of leadership, and in terms of clients. So from a talent perspective, we've been doing a number of things, as Ben mentioned as well, around recruitment, going to blind recruitment and thinking differently about qualifications and looking more for sort of future focused skills. And leadership, we've done an enormous amount, particularly focused around improving the proportion of senior women that we have. And actually, we've made a 9 percentage points increase on that in the last 5 years, which we're very proud about. Still more to do, but we have made progress, and the sorts of things we've done there as well. We've not only focused that around our women, we focused it around our senior men as well. So we had a program called Empowering Growth for Men, which was really about getting our senior men to reflect on the way they were supporting female colleagues, and go to their female colleagues and get feedback on how they were and weren't supporting them, which was very powerful, actually, very powerful in terms of the conversations that ended up me having with some of my senior colleagues who came and asked me for my views, but also just as a signal to the business about how serious we were about that. And then the third strand, clients, we've been really trying to think about, okay, well, if this matters to us, how do we show that it matters in the market? So you've already referenced the work we've done with the MRS, but obviously we've done a number of other things like the Reykjavik Index around women leadership, and the work we've done with DIVA around lesbian representativity in the media, and the work we've done in finance about why women customers are underserved. So we've tried to do things in the market as well, which hopefully reflect our values as an organisation.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important that we not only just look internally, but we also look externally, so that we're driving the industry forward. And I think that point about powerful conversations is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I know, Steve, within Zappi, you had a lot of listening to your team first in order to think through your own direction.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I was very pleased that we got involved with this CEO pledge. For me, it was personally a moment of reflection. I think we were, quite a hard driving entrepreneurial organization that as soon as I started thinking about the pledge, I realized that our senior leadership team was entirely white male. And that was wrong. I mean, it was because we were the entrepreneurs who set up the company, and it was a merged company. So we've changed that leadership team subsequently. And it's been a good spark for us to talk to people internally, but also to reach out into the community. We're working with, I mean, it's slightly different really because we're a tech company. So in many ways, we build software for a much more diverse industry than is the industry that we're in some sense, which is technology, which is incredibly white and male, as you know. So, but we're working with organizations like Black Coder, which is an organization encouraging Black women to get into programming. Yeah, so it's been a good spur for action for us to do things internally. And as Ben was saying, the critical thing we've done, I suppose, in terms of change, other than the leadership, is the talent, and looking at it slowed us down in terms of recruitment, but ensuring that we get a diverse pool at the top of the funnel. That has been the critical thing that we've pushed for, which is very hard in tech, but we've just made as much effort as we can.
I think that's the thing that strikes me when I read everything that all of your organisations have been doing is about this real acceleration and urgency of action. And I know, Warren, in JFK, you've got exactly that. You've got a fast forward programme that you've put in place. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the job of that programme really is twofold. I think one is to put in place some key kind of stakes in the ground in terms of what our aims are, and those aims echo a lot of the aims already talked about by Steve and by Ben, in terms of making sure that recruitment funnel is suitably diverse, in terms of making sure that we have female representation throughout the interview process, making sure that all of those kind of bits and pieces are in place. But I think most importantly for me, what the Fast Forward programme is about is it's about giving a voice and an accountability. So it's about really opening up the conversation between senior management and the broader workforce, so that people feel that, I think, to Ben's point about what gets measured gets done, that we're open and transparent in publishing all of the statistics that we have. And like everyone else, we still have a way to go in terms of getting to where we need to get to. But I think also enabling a conversation and making sure that we've got a diverse group of people coming in to talk to us as a business, setting appropriate kind of role models, etc.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, it was just because everyone suddenly froze. Did you want to just repeat that last bit, because I'm not sure everybody would have got it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I think the Fast Forward Network is, as well as being a series of guidelines and principles around recruitment and around talent, etc., it's also an opportunity for us to highlight what is being done well, and also to be truly accountable. As I say, it's about making sure that those people in the wider business are able to raise their voice and be heard by the senior management, because I think we have a way to go as senior leaders to not be the kind of white middle class that we tend to be historically, but that's about filling the pipe and filling that succession plan piece, and making sure that we've got people coming through the business who can take on those roles in the longer term. So I think it's about making sure they feel that they've got, as an industry, we have a duty to make sure that there are appropriate role models in place for those people coming into the business, so that they see an opportunity and see a way to get to that leadership position. And that's part of our challenge, but part of our big opportunity as well.
What I loved about us all coming together initially as a group is that spirit of collaboration and transparency about what everybody was working on, so that we could all learn from each other. And obviously, as we move forward, we're really excited about trying to get to share that learning even further, but also get more people signed up to the pledge. I think, Jane, we have an ambition of 100 people by the end of the year signed up to the pledge. And Bob, you're the last person, the very latest, to sign the pledge. Could you just tell us a little bit about why you've signed up?
Oh, absolutely. When I first heard about the pledge and my esteemed colleagues here, it was great to see the larger organizations, and each of our colleagues here have between hundreds and thousands of employees. My thinking at the time was it's a fascinating and wonderful endeavor, but I guess it's just for the larger companies. Not everybody can sign up. And it's only as I was talking further with Jane and the rest of the MRS team, they said, well, no, we have a goal of trying to get 100 leaders, people who are at the helm of their organizations. And it doesn't matter if they're large, medium-sized or small, because everybody can play their part. And that's why I immediately signed on. And I would encourage all other organizations to join in. And you don't necessarily have to have the title of CEO. It needs really to be somebody who can drive change through their organization. And I'm going to use a quote here. It's your quote, Vanilla, from the report that we had. And the quote says, look, words are easy. It's the actions we take internally within our own organizations and externally that will drive real change. And I think if by this time, by the end of the year or by this time next year, we have 100+ organizations signed up, that's going to make some real impact within our industry and making sure that the reflection of our organizations looks like the reflection that we see when we look out in the street. You know, when you look out and you see all the wonderful colors, all the different genders, however people describe themselves, we have them in each of our organizations. Now, if you only have 5 people, you'll not be able to cover everybody. But if you've got 500 or 1,000, and as Ben and Warren rightly say, you can make that happen. I particularly like what Steve said in terms of looking at that senior board and saying, okay, look, this is how we started our company. It was these people that did it. Now we are empowered and we have enough people to make sure that we can drive these changes through. And I do believe that even if you're a small company, you will be dealing with lots of other companies. Us at iView, for example, we have 120 different clients that come in to run their focus groups, including all of the companies that are managed by our colleagues here. So we can help drive that change too.
I love that point that you say about anybody in our industry can make a difference here. And actually that's what we need. And I hope us coming today together is about demonstrating that collaboration and giving everybody the inspiration to have a voice in this. Ben, I know that you wanted to.
Well, I was just noticing a question from the audience, which is about it's a riposte to us saying that we're sorting out our recruitment, and they're then saying, what about BAME staff, Black, Asian, minority ethnic staff when they're in the organisations now? And I think it's a good question because I think we're going to make pretty rapid progress on gender balance at senior levels. Certainly we have over the last few years, and I'm sure others on this call have. And we've got, of course, we've got a good talent pool in terms of gender. I don't think there's an issue there. I do think there's a particular issue over ethnic diversity. Are we trying to be representative of London, where many of us are based? Are we trying to be representative of the United Kingdom, which is a slightly different ethnic profile? But I mean, we've got a race, ethnicity and cultural heritage group. I do talk to them. So I think that's a fair question from the audience. What are we doing about that? But I think it is going to take time to get people promoted through the organization. And it's good for the chief executives to sign up. But ultimately, as I think Amy, others on the call will reflected on this, it is about the behaviors of lots of people inside the organization at these individual promotion points. And we do absolutely need to listen to our BAME staff. And we do. I suspect we would all say that we do, but maybe we can always do more.
Absolutely, and I know some people have extra mentoring and coaching sessions to support talent that we can try and bring through faster. And I think, Amy, you're doing that in Kantar, aren't you?
Yeah, we are doing that, exactly that. We have a mentoring program for ethnic minority colleagues, and we also have a group called Colourful at Kantar, which is again a group that sort of celebrates, because part of it, for us as well is about making people feel included and wanting to be part of our business. I totally take on board that comment that the person's made. It's not just about the pipeline, and we've given a lot of thought to that. And you know, I was hearing Trevor Phillips speak about this the other week and saying about this sort of concept of snowy peaks where people in the organisation look up and all they can see is white people, and why would that feel like a great place to be? So I think some of the things we try and do with the Colourful at Kantar Group is just explore making people feel included and celebrated for who they are and their difference within our organisation. Because yeah, I think it's right. I can understand why people wouldn't want to stay and progress in an organisation if they can't see that at the top of it.
And Bob, I know that you're addressing this issue within the colour research.
Oh, absolutely. The Colour of Research is part of the Diversity and Inclusive Council that we have within the Market Research Society. I remember back at the MRS Awards in December when we could all get together, year after 2019, looking around and meeting a couple of other colleagues and thinking this number of Black, Brown, Asian people with different backgrounds, ethnicities, they're not very well represented here. And this is supposed to be the helm of our organizations in our industry. So you've got leaders who are up for awards, but also they're a guest. They're guests there too. And it was at that point, and this is before Black Lives Matter happened, that a group of us got together and said, we've been talking about this for a long, long time, but why don't we try and do something, but give it some structure and some cohesiveness and make sure that we've got some platform for something to grow. And that's how we created the Colour of Research. There are 8 of us from different backgrounds that put together a number of programs that the industry can lean on, especially if we look at our reports where 25% of people from diverse and ethnic backgrounds have said they're actually looking to leave the organization because they don't feel that they're being encouraged and developed within their careers. We actually have some measurement to try and change. So having the Colour of Research, we've got a mentorship program, we've got a buddy system, we've put in place talks and sessions to help encourage and guide people. And I must say, all aligned to the Market Research Society. That is our governing body, so that we all work together. We're aligned to MRS Pride, so we make sure that we have a triage of collective way of doing something. But that is very, very important. And the point that was made earlier by Ben is that what is national representation and what is local representation? And it's a point that my colleague Theo Francis makes very well and very often, is that if you are in central London, you know you've got 40% of the people that live in around that area come from different ethnic backgrounds. So your firms ought to try and use that as a goal for what the representation should be. But if you're in like Durham or Newcastle, then the numbers are going to be very different, but at least you can try and represent what is there for that region. But also overall as a company, you are, if you like, almost anonymous to the CVs that come in. You don't know what the gender of the person is, what their name is, but you're relying that selection purely based on the skill sets. And you haven't precluded or excluded people who've had a university background, because let's face it, a lot of people who come from deprived areas, ethnic background, may not have had the opportunity to have that route of going to university, but they're incredibly smart people who can do very well in our organization. So give them another opportunity to come in. And as Amy says very well, in the organization, have somebody or a group of people that can continue to guide those people along who've had an unfair start in the working world. And that's why we can try and reduce that 25% figure of people who are thinking they're leaving the organization.
Yeah. I think it's very easy, isn't it, for us all to come on a panel like this and talk about our achievements. But it is the research that that Kantar have been doing, and Versity as well, which says that whilst 86% of people in the organisation feel valued, only 9% of people of different ethnic backgrounds feel that they have the same opportunities and fairness. So we do, as a group of people, need to make more rapid progress. And I know, Jane, that you wanted to comment on that.
Yes, I think 2 things. One is, I think that research is really important so that we can actually decide what our priorities are and measure, as Bob said, as Ben said, measure how we're doing, because that's the only way we'll change. but I actually wanted to give you a little piece of good news, because as of now, thanks to what Bob said, I think I've just signed another person up to the pledge. They just sent me an email. It's QRI Consulting, Simon Patterson, so he will be writing his commitment and getting his first badge. But I think it's absolutely brilliant, because it is absolutely right. It's about all of us. And there is a question online about where you find out who signed up. It is on the website. So all the people who've signed up are on the website, and they are using their logos on their Research Buyers Guide pages as well. So that's a call to any client. You can find out who's committed to this as well. So I think it's really important. So well done, Bob. Well done, Vanilla. Another sign up today. Another one towards our 100 for the year.
Hopefully, we'll get some more following this call. One of the most important things is actually learning from each other's mistakes. And I would be interested to hear what challenges you found and lessons you might want to share with this group of things that you found along the way in implementing some of this new policies and approaches.
Well,
I think, sorry, go ahead, then.
No, you go, Warren, go on.
I was just going to sort of echo something that Steve said, actually, and I think it's a challenge for a lot of us, which is, one of the transformations that we're going through as an industry at the moment is towards more of a tech-enabled business. A lot of us are moving from kind of traditional market research into, a lot of the hiring that we're doing at the moment is more in that tech space. And guess what? That's another sector that has a problem here. And I think we are facing challenges, and Steve referenced it, in terms of filling the recruitment pipe with the right profiles, because the kind of roles that we're hiring for at the moment, particularly in that tech space. And I think, so while we have made some good steps forward, and I do see some positivity, there's a huge amount still for us to do as an industry, and more broadly, for the workforce in the tech space, particularly to get the right people in place and get a diverse section of people coming in for those roles. Because what I see as the challenge for us is that we are in danger as an industry, certainly within GfK, of evolving into another space which is historically kind of white male. So I do see that as a challenge for us.
I was just going to reflect on my journey last year, because I've been in the same company, as many of you know, since I was 5 years old, and I've stayed here partly so I could get rid of everybody who made me miserable when I joined in 1987. And of course, I've changed the company over the last 33 years to be more like I wanted it to be. But I think that this is a key point. I think there's a lot of people in the industry who think they're pretty right on. I'm 56 and I'm a right on 56-year-old. I'll confess that. But the point I think that we've discovered in 2020 has been brought home to us, I think, by the events of 2020, is that what somebody born in 1965 thinks is the right thing to do, is the right sort of culture, is different than my boss, who was born in 1947. And it's different, but very different again from somebody who was born in the 1990s, like my son and my younger graduates, and what they expect. And so we do have this generational differences now in terms of expectations. And I think being aware and sensitive to that is really, certainly to me, that was a wake-up call. And that, we're all researchers, so we should be able to understand the perspective of different generations, but it's seeing it live. It's one thing to do the research on generational differences. It's one of the things that we spent a lot of time looking at, actually, but we all love millennials and Gen Z, etc. in our work, but understanding how that plays out inside our organizations and the different, because now, of course, I've got old white guys telling me that I'm a statistician and I've analyzed the gender pay gap, and as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist, because clearly we're just paying for skills, but it's like sort of, blah, blah. Meanwhile, I've got, young people wanting me to take the knee live on national TV, which would feel to me fake. So there's some really, I think that's been a real wake up. And I think listening to people, making sure that you're hearing all those voices, and you've got the networks to do that. And I think we've heard some great examples on this call, is really important. But it isn't easy, and we do have different groups in a big diverse company. You will have different expectations, and as you go faster, it's funny. I was doing a speech for the V&A yesterday on the empire in Britain, and they have in their own organisation. I think Tristram, who runs the V&A, wouldn't mind me saying this. You know, some of them want to say that everything Britain did before 1900 was terrible. And and meanwhile, of course, a lot of their customers are older folk who think actually there were some quite good things about the British Empire. And so where do you come out? And I think these are just things that we need to have the conversation, but be sensitive to that. And that was my wake-up call. As a result, I've become a non-exec chairman of a diversity network which works in Britain and America. It's a side hustle sort of thing. But there's a lot more we can do to open our minds. But I think that generational difference is something that sometimes I don't know how many, a lot of us on this call over 40 and maybe even older looking around, we need to be aware of.
I know what you're saying, Ben. I'm clearly under 30.
Okay.
Yeah, totally under 30. I think you raise a really good point, which is the personal journey that we've all had to go on as leaders of our businesses. And I probably think that the last 12 months might have been the most confronting time as leaders, and realizing, what personal reflections that you have through this period and how this impacts what we're trying to achieve with diversity. Got any other personal
I'm happy to reflect, Vanilla. I say what my background is in market research, like Ben's. I've been in my whole career, but actually I think I spent most of my non-entrepreneurial life with a female boss. So, but I've also ended up at Zappi and running a company which is a technology company which has a very, very different problems than market research. Market research seems incredibly diverse compared to the technology industry most of the time. Now, the good thing is, and we were talking about mistakes earlier, that we are trying to do outreach, and I think there's a lot of self-reflection within the technology industry that there is a significant problem to change. But we're talking about mistakes. We've reached out, as I said, to the Black Coder group and trying to recruit through them, but also do talks. And we posted a LinkedIn thing about how wonderful we were going to this Black Coder event, and it had 3 white male programmers who had gone to the event, and that was the photograph, and it just didn't look very good. And you have that problem that Amy was talking about in terms of the Snowy Peak. We've got to have, we have a more ethnically diverse group than that, but you've got to be showcasing the Black female programmers and the more diverse programmers in order to attract the right people in. So
yes, I mean, I wonder whether as leaders then we need to start with our own humility, and maybe a different kind of leadership style that is required, to Ben's point. And Amy, I know that Kantar are doing a lot with female leadership. I mean, I just wondered if you had any thoughts on leadership style that could help this, and maybe even culturally what needs to be done.
I mean, I definitely think listening is really critical, and it's interesting. I'm just looking at some of the questions as we're talking, and there's a lot in there which is kind of referencing that, really, that ability to listen. And so with the events of last summer and what happened with George Floyd and the subsequent Black Lives Matter movement, we had some what we call safe space sharing sessions in Kantar, which was an opportunity for us to listen. It was, in fairness, it was our US colleagues who first came up with the idea, but it went really well in the US business and much appreciated. So we did it in Britain as well. And that was really very difficult to listen to. And, I just to the point about, learnings of last year, obviously, I know racism exists. I'm not an idiot, but I when you actually hear people describing some of the experiences they've had, and I'm not talking about 10 years ago, I'm talking about in the last year, I'm talking about things that you just can't quite imagine happen, then, you have to listen to that, and you have to just think about, okay, well, and I think, Bob, you made the point about people starting from behind. You have to acknowledge that yourself, that, maybe at times I felt that things have held me back as a woman, perhaps yes or no, but the simple fact is I'm still considerably more privileged than other people because of my background. So Yeah, I absolutely think being able to be in that listening mode and being able to, and I found it quite hard because I'm quite an action sort of oriented person. So the minute I hear something like that, well, how do we fix that? How do we fix that? But you can't just jump to fix. You need to listen and you need to try and understand, and that can be quite tough, I think.
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. There are a plethora of issues and challenges that we have. Do you go 5 miles wide and 1 inch deep? Or do you say, look, we're going to really have to prioritize and maybe go 1 mile wide, but try and go 500 meters deep and then pick of these one at a time. So it's more of a stacked, but you're touching on all of the points. So the key word is equality, to try and make sure that everybody, every person has an equal opportunity. And that's not just on the diverse inclusion. We're talking also about people with disability. We need to make sure that they're taken care of. We need to make sure we're taking care of, in particularly over the last 10 months, people whose mental well-being has probably just fallen out of the roof. Those of us who've been working for 10 years or so or more probably have a system to cope. But what if you just come into the industry? You're only in a year or 2 years in. You're still maybe living with your parents, or you've got a flat share. Where do you make these calls? How do you have that engagement? Because the world around us is closed. So I think the point is that there are a lot of things that we as leaders need to do. We as leaders need to take on board all the suggestions and comments that are made by the people who are suffering these. And then we have to work together with each of those groups to find a way of how we can prioritize all of them, because that individual, their issue is the most important, and that should come up first. But we as leaders know you can't do everything all at the same time. You can try very hard. And that's why I think if we've got 27 or 28 leaders on this group, when we get to 100, I'm really looking forward to the next CEO pledge, which is actually maybe got 8 or 9 of us, but we have some people who might be 24 or 25. I won't pick an age, but somebody who's under 30 sat here and says, well, actually, people of my generation, which is the point that was made so well by Ben, is that every decade, a person that is born is going to think slightly differently about an issue to someone the decade earlier. And I think that would be wonderful if we have, you know, the likes of Steve, for example, but 20 years ago, you know, before he got into this entrepreneurial route, what was his thinking then? So that's my comment on trying to take account of all the different diverse and backgrounds that people have.
And Ben,
I was just going to come in. Well, I think just reflecting on some of the comments, I think one of the things that we have done as an industry, but we need to make a lot more progress on, not just because I don't know about Amy, but the larger companies are just giving money to HM Treasury every month when we should be spending it on apprentices, is that is another route in that will help us become more reflective of the communities and society that we're serving. And so absolutely get your apprentices in, and they are likely to come from different backgrounds to people from universities. Absolutely the right thing to do, those partnerships with schools. And I think also we haven't talked about disability yet, but maybe one thing that actually that is positive that will come out of the pandemic, and some work I've been doing for the CBI has looked at, you know, this actually, if we are going to have more diffuse workforces where we don't have to be sitting in rows of desks in our offices every day of the week in future, is that we can actually, you know, people who might have, for people with disabilities, this is going to be potentially, this could be really, really positive, because we've changed the taboo about remote working has been thoroughly busted by the pandemic. And I think that means as well that we can, you know, there's all sorts of other ways we can help improve our diversity. We can better represent the communities and societies that we serve.
I want to come back to the research, which says that most people have witnessed or experienced some form of discrimination inside our industry. And I found that the most shocking statistic when I reflected on the research. And I'm just wondering, culturally, what we need to do. I mean, do we really understand the discrimination that goes on? And what culturally do we need to do in order to address it?
I mean, we did a number of activities in Race Equality Awareness Week a couple of weeks ago, including a session about how to be anti-racist, not just not racist. And that was a really interesting session, actually, because it explored the way that you should challenge some of the things that you hear in an active way in the moment, making it clear how unacceptable it is. And I think some of that are the things we need to think about, and we need allies. We have an ally program in Kantar as well, which we started from last summer, to really help people feel, firstly, supported if they want to tackle the issue, but secondly, obviously, why should they have to tackle the issue, frankly, and that's quite traumatizing in of itself. So trying to generate a culture where, firstly, that's quite clearly unacceptable and not tolerated, but secondly, that we're asking people to take that extra step of not just kind of, as we put it, complaining about it to someone else later, like, I can't believe someone said that, but actually tackling it right there in the moment and saying, I'm sorry, I don't know why you just said that's completely unacceptable. So I think there's things like that which can really support with building that culture that we need to make people feel included.
I definitely think it, following Black Lives Matter, having the willingness to have challenging conversations about difficult subjects was a key thing that came out of that. I don't know if any other reflections on the impact of Black Lives Matter on how you responded inside your own organisations.
I can talk about it a little bit. I mean, we've got a large presence in the States, and it was particularly around the riots, was very shocking for a lot of people. And we had a pause and then an outreach and listening session internally. It was actually led by Ryan, who's our CRO and runs the Americas. And out of that came some work streams that we've put in place around trying to increase their voice, but also about what we should say. And I found it actually very difficult to determine. I ended up sending a note to the whole company, but I found it very difficult initially to put my name in the ring as an English person, but also as a white English person. It was more about being English, to be honest, to say something about what was a burning of American cities and riots and oppression of Black minorities, particularly by American police. But then I was glad I did say something about the support that we wanted to give to the communities, because then it started becoming more of a global movement. But it was very difficult to decide what to do, actually, at the time. I found it very hard.
Yes, I know, it was confronting. Anyone else wanted to?
I had to apologize to the staff, because I started off by saying our job is to objectively measure what's happening. We were filming, because we're doing ethnography across the world on a daily basis. So we were filming. We had Black participants in the riots filming the riots in America. And my first reaction was that our job as a profession is to understand this, document it, and document the inequalities that are driving this. But of course, actually, that sort of slightly dispassionate professional view, of course, was nowhere near emotional enough for my people. And of course, we've done, hence I'm now the global, I keep saying that an old white middle class guy shouldn't be the right person. I'm now the leader of our global initiative on diversity and inclusion at Ipsos in our 90 countries. But absolutely, and I think it's that understanding of the emotion. And it's interesting, only 30% of white people in Britain think we're racist as a country. But I think what Black Lives Matter drove home, both inside the business and outside it, was that 54% of Black people think it's a racist country. So we're going to have to decide which one of those is right. And I'll probably go with the Black people's perception of it, to be honest. So no, I think it's been really important. I've learned a lot, but I think there's there's an awful lot we can do.
Bob.
Yeah, when we formed the Colour of Research, which was probably about February time, and what happened was that with lockdown we kind of accelerated it, but once the Black Lives Matter issue happened, that accelerated even more. And when we sat around a Zoom meeting with about 8 of us, it's the first time I saw a grown man and a grown woman cry from the experiences they'd had, which they'd never shared before. And that represents that 54% and how emotionally held in these issues and challenges this group of people have had for a long time, but never been able to say anything about it or felt comfortable to say it. And whom do they say it to? So having this group, we had an ability to say, well, we are all suffering in this particular group. How do we make that change? And I don't think there is an issue that we've got a white middle-aged man in charge of a diversity program, because that is the group of people that we want to have as our allies. You need to convert those guys. You can't just say, oh, here's a group of us and we're going to go ahead and do something, and exclude all the people that you perceive or you genuinely know are the people that could be creating an issue. We want to embrace. We want to embrace, bring everybody on board, because the whole idea of inclusiveness is inclusiveness. It's having everybody on that group. So I know, and I don't even have to ask really, Ben will have a team around him that will say, right, you're going to be looking after this area. You're in charge of disability. You're looking after this. Let's meet up on a regular basis and create the structure that we need to drive ourselves forward. So I think you can either do that in a large organization where you have lots of people, or if you're a smaller organization and you want some help and advice and some thinking on that, how do I take this step forward? Because I'm really wanting to know how to do it. Come to the MRS on Diversity and Inclusion Council, talk to them, come to the Colour of Research, go and talk to WIRE, Women in Research. That's a really important organisations. But we do have 3 or 4 really good organisations that we can all actually make them first move. What we don't need or don't want is to wait to be spoon-fed and told what to do. We need to be part of the solution rather than feeling we're just a part of the problem.
I love the fact that as leaders, we're learning new things about ourselves, and Ben, you know, the recognition of the power of emotion and the importance of emotion, and then asking for help also. But I wonder to the others, are there any other reflected learnings on yourselves as leaders that you've experienced in this last year that will help us drive this issue forward?
I think one of the interesting things about it, and I don't have an answer, I just raise it as a question for the wider group, I suppose, is that these 2 issues came along, you know, synchronously, which is, you know, this huge outpouring of the Black Lives Matter piece, and then also the fact that we, because of the obviously ongoing pandemic, weren't able to collectively address it in person. And I think there's a kind of wider question here for what company culture looks like and how company culture can change in an environment where you're not, you know, in the same room as one another. And I think that, you know, that it presents, doesn't mean it's impossible, but it means that you have to take a different series of steps and a different approach to having that open conversation, to have, you know, if we're in a culture historically where people don't feel they can speak up in an open forum, you know, how is that magnified or exacerbated in a situation where everyone's stuck in their kitchen or their living room and not really interacting directly with people and able to have that offhand conversation over a coffee or, you know, directly. And so I think there's a broader issue that I haven't got to the bottom of, and I think we still need to address as a society, let alone as an industry. But, you know, how does company culture change, and how do we keep it on this track towards inclusivity when we are all feeling to some extent isolated? And that may come down to some of what Ben talks about in terms of the generational thing, but I think there's also, I think, you know, probably a lot of young people who not only are feeling the effects of this, but also feeling the effects of the isolation at the same time. And I think we need to look at how we address that. As I say, I don't have an answer, and I think it's something we're very cognizant of and working towards, but certainly something that I think is hugely important in relation to how these 2 issues coalesce.
I mean, sorry, I was just going to say, I think there is the one thing I would say is that the work that, you know, measuring business sentiment across Britain, I think what's clear is that this industry is changing, but actually also it's part of a broader change. If you talk to people running the FTSE 500 or even smaller companies, you can see a clear at least willingness or stated willingness to act on this, particularly after the events of 2020 in 2021. Now, we do need to hold people like us and certainly in much larger organizations who make up the FTSE 500 boards, because of course when we come to something like gender representation in the FTSE, you know, 96% of them saying they're really working hard to improve gender diversity on their boards, and then we actually look at the data which shows glacial progress, and I think the number of black people on boards of major corporates in Britain is sort of going backwards, if anything. So we need to be careful about, you know, it's all very nice people talking about this stuff, but overall, let's be positive. And I think, and that is that there is a clear shift. There's been a clear shift in sentiment in business, not just in the research industry. I think you can see it in advertising, you can see it in marketing, you can see it, you know, across in the entire economy towards acting on this. And I think it's been sharpened by the way the pandemic has focused us on inequalities of all sorts. And we should just keep going. And it's great that we're doing this stuff, but we, you know, let the young folk will be on this. So they're probably saying stuff now. They'll just be saying, show us the proof, and that's fair enough.
Steve.
I was going to add to that. I think one of the things that we're in the process of applying for B Corp status, and that B Corp is around recognizing the need for companies to be focused on people, planet, and profit, and aligning around all three. And I'm chairing the sustainability board. And for me, it's more of it's not just about diversity and inclusivity. It's about the type of business you want to be and the type of impact on society you want to make. And this is one of those issues. And I think the great thing about the B Corp process is trying to tie all of those things together about just being a better corporate citizen.
I'm interested, given that we have lots of people listening, what you think they can do within their own organisations, what actions you might encourage for them to help every business move forward around diversity.
Even if you're not required to by law, do the gender pay gap, do the ethnic pay gap. It's going to be difficult, but it's only when you look at these things and every time you do the promotion round, look at what you're doing and how it's working out in terms of driving change. Every time you do the pay rises and bonuses, look at how it's driving change. And that ultimately is, you know, and the other thing is the sponsorship and mentoring of people. It's great to have the networks. And I think many of us have got them, but I think the business school evidence is that actually ultimately the sponsorship, mentoring and targets is what's actually driving the change.
I think I would add sort of maybe at lower levels in the organisation as well. I think some of the things that we've done around allyship have been very galvanizing for our people and also empowering for them to understand what kind of business we're trying to build and why it's okay for them to call out things they don't feel happy about or don't feel are acceptable. We've used a lot the expression "not on my watch" as well, and we've made it easier for people to come to more senior people if they feel that's the best route for them in the first instance. So to really make people feel like that's the kind of business we want to build, and therefore you're absolutely, you know, able to call these things out. So I think there's things like that from a personal. And the other thing I would say is really help us promote our industry, because I loved what the recent thing James Endersby's done with Significant Insights, where he's just trying to take the industry in different directions in terms of not just talking about some of the senior people that we hear from a lot, but really interviewing people from junior through to senior about their careers, lots of different people, different backgrounds. And you know, how much do you talk about the industry outside to friends, to family? How do you talk about it? How do you promote it? I think that's the thing we can all do to just really bring it to different audiences.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, you know, and to echo what both Ben and Amy said, is around approachability and accountability. So it's about making people feel that they can speak out if they need to, but also by signing up to things like the pledge and using stuff like the metrics, etc., is being accountable and standing in front of your workforce and saying, this is where we are. It might not be where we want to be, but this is where we are, and I'm accountable for that, and I'm open to have a conversation about how we fix it, and I want your input and input to drive that. And I think there is a broader piece also mentioned by me about how we promote the industry to kind of change that more broadly as well. But I think it's that approach, openness, the culture of openness and approachability, coupled with a true accountability that, you know, the pledge isn't just something we sign up to, it's something that we own and something that we take very seriously and that we promote internally.
It's a very good point that Amy makes, and it's also reflected in the questions that people outside the industry don't know about it. Most of us drifted into the industry without choosing it. But what's interesting, and I've found this certainly where we're involved with academies in Tower Hamlets and in Southwark, the more talented kids from diverse backgrounds would probably think that I wasn't really respectable enough as an industry to go into. So they want to go, they'll go into banking, or they'll go into, I don't know, the medicine or something like that. But research, it's sort of, I don't, it's, and so there's some issues there about it as well, I think. And that's a reminder for us all to give lots of money to the MRS to push on campaigns but in generally, and we talk about milk rounds, etc. And many of us, of course, are doing outreach programs in not the usual places. So, not Oxbridge, because we've got plenty of Oxbridge graduates, but obviously in more unusual places. And I think that's certainly something that we can do in a more disciplined way. It's always hard in this. We're all busy. We're not, market research is not the best paid industry either. So we're not awash with staff who can go and do these things, but we need to do it. And I think the more we can do it together, we're also quite insular sometimes. So it's great that we're having this conversation. There's probably a lot more that we can do to focus on some geographic areas. Don't know what Bob thinks about that, to try and again make market research perhaps something that people from non-traditional backgrounds are likely to even be aware of.
Bob.
Well, I come from, I was raised in a West London town called Southall. It's often known as Little Punjab or Little India. And I think it's taken 35 years for me to meet Sia Najumi, who's also from Southall. And that's the only other person I know at this moment in time who comes from a deprived area that I grew up in. And I see a natural leader in her. I know she's going to do incredibly well. What she has now that someone like me did not have 30 years ago. I mean, I've been in market research 35 years. Are some mentors, are some opportunities to go on the courses. So my point really was going to be about the courses that are available from the Market Research Society, the webinars that we have, what the Colour of Research offers, what Women in Research offers, and also Significant Insights by James Endersby. Get involved. If everybody gets involved in all of these from zero, even if you've got 10% more learning than you had last year, but you build up 10% every year for the next 5 years, wow, 50% increase, I'd be delighted with that. And if you compound it, it's probably closer to 75% awareness of what is required. Everybody can play a part. And it's, it's a bit like looking over your shoulder and thinking, well, someone else will do it. They won't. You're the someone else. You have to do it.
I know Steve has some interesting points about this and the power of our industry to navigate change and the opportunity for people to be a bit more entrepreneurial in research.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fantastically entrepreneurial industry. We have thousands of small businesses, and it creates an opportunity for lots of people from different backgrounds to start their own business, and that is happening. I did want to say that there is one area of research that we haven't talked about in terms of diversity and inclusivity, and that's a sample aspect of the business. And there are problems there. I mean, we've got a group internally looking at it at the moment, and we talk about nationally representative samples all the time in our industry, and how nationally representative are they? And that is something that everyone in the industry can be looking at right now. I mean, we can look at it at every project we do, and I really think that's something that we need to sort out as well.
I absolutely agree.
Vanilla, if I can just say, I would say lean in, because we do have some really good examples in things like MRS Pride of the vibrancy and the co-support that you can get from there. And I've always been a bit disappointed that and more haven't been more challenging, which is the young researchers. They've got a platform there where they can be challenging, and they ought to be getting together and being challenging. And I know Anne Moore and MRS Pride have got together and with CORE, and more of that, please. We have got a programme on NatRep going in MRS at the moment, and Caroline Frankham from Kantar is involved, for example. We think that we ought to be helping clients to be asking the right questions about this in particular. And I would also want to say to people, please, if you want to get involved in apprenticeships will be launching for the MRS, for the research sector in, we hope, Q3. 15 companies already signed up to that. And I think Ben said, why are we giving money away to HMRC when we could be using it ourselves on developing people? And there is actually a financial incentive to get that going. So, I mean, I would just really encourage people to be standing forward, speaking up and participating, because it's we can't drag people forward. We need to be pulling, but we need people to be actually pushing as well.
And I think the opportunity is for everybody in the industry, whatever level you are, to hold all of us, everybody, each other accountable, because that accountability is really what's going to be the fuel that accelerates the progress of everything that we've been talking about here today. I know that it's seconds away from on top of the hour, so I just want to thank everybody so much for being willing to come together and having this open conversation. It's been absolutely fascinating, and a lot of learnings, I think, for people to draw on, and as you say, a very optimistic message. But let's still recognise there's a lot of work to be done, and I think how we collaborate as an industry and drive this forward is critical, and we hope that this is a good inspiration for everybody else to get involved. And it's 12 o'clock.
Hooray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye. Good to see you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Good to see you all.
Thanks.